what's going on, everybody? It's Jeff and Justin, the Frustrated Rockstars, another podcast from Meat Hands in Sandy Springs.
Yep, Sandy Springs.
At night.
At night.
We got the pub atmosphere going.
The pub atmosphere. If you see my chicken fingers come up out of the kitchen, just let me know, please. Just holler out. So this is a great location.
Yeah, we're getting very comfortable here.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It's got that pub feel.
We want to do one now for the bass players.
For the bass players.
A lot of times the unsung heroes here. Cheers.
Yes, cheers to the bass players.
A lot of times the unsung heroes in bands. And of course, my prime example being Michael Anthony of Van Halen. Not only is he underrated, but he was basically kicked out of Van Halen.
That only took 15 seconds for you to mention Van Halen in a podcast. Very nice.
Well, it's a hot topic now because of this fake reunion tour, but that's a whole other podcast. Check it out.
When it comes to bass players, I think a lot of people don't really understand what the bass player means to a band because, you know the singer, you see him, the guitar player, and even drummers, certain drummers have earned, celebrity status, but bass players are just the forgotten, they're the offensive linemen, to use a sports analogy, they're the offensive linemen of a band.
Right.
You don't know who their names are, but they're so important and pivotal to everybody else, all the stars scoring a touchdown, that's the guys blocking.
Right. They are the blockers.
They are the blockers.
Yep.
He doesn't understand sports. So
blockers is what I understand. I know what blockers do.
I think, I did a little research today, and of course I know about bass players too. My all-time favorite musician is Nicky Six. So, I think really, Paul McCartney was a bass player.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney, bass players aren't usually, I think, thought of as songwriters.
Right, they're usually not the leader of the band. They're usually like in the background, but it's kind of odd, like you said, like Paul McCartney, Nicky Six.
Who wrote the songs?
Sting.
Hello.
They're the kind of the exception to the unknown bass player rule because everyone knows them. They are the leaders of the band. They write most of the songs.
According to what I read today, and I was looking around, they really give Jack Bruce from Cream and John Entwistle from The Who were really like the first bass players to really kind of make a splash as bass players.
Bust out on the scene as bass players.
Not just keeping time and rhythm, but actually putting some melody, some melodic notes into the play.
Like to me, even though if a bass player doesn't write a song, write lyrics, or write riffs, or write music, if you add a cool bass line, does that deserve songwriting credit? In some songs, the bass line is part of the hook.
Under pressure.
I mean,
Another one bites the dust.
Yeah.
The two Queen songs that are driven by the bass lines. I think they get songwriting credits on those.
But I think on some they don't.
Yeah, I guess.
Even though the bass player may, come up with the great riff, it may not be. I don't know.
I think it's different roles for different bands.
Right.
When you look at Rush, you got Geddy Lee.
Right. Again,
he's singing and playing bass, but doesn't write the songs. The drummer does.
Right.
That's an anomaly. And of course, Sting.
Writing most of the songs.
Writes most of the songs. Those are very rare. Another thing, Nicky Six, when he started, he couldn't even play the bass. But he just looked so cool. Yeah, he was just there kind of almost as a presence. Same with Sid Vicious. Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols.
Oh, he couldn't play at all.
He was unplugged.
Yeah,
he was just so wacky.
They had to shut him off.
Didn't even know he wasn't plugged in.
Even at CBGB's, they had to shut him down.
Literally, he didn't know either.
But he had the
charisma,
style and the look and the
So like it's different roles, in different bands. Now, going back to Michael Anthony, he was the high harmonies. I don't think he wrote much of anything, but certainly,
he was given credit though. In the early years, they all shared songwriting credit. All four of them: Dave, Eddie, Alex, Michael. But he probably didn't write as much. But he does contribute to the sound. Like again with the high harmony. I always think that's funny though that when a bass player plays bass and sings the high harmony.
Right.
The guys in the bass players in the Eagles did the same thing. Randy Meisner first, and then Timothy B. Schmidt. They play bass, but they sing the high harmony. I just find that weird. They're
hard to do that in your head?
Yeah, it seems like it'd be hard. It seems like the hardest thing to do in your head is to sing high, play low.
You would think they wouldn't have good singing voices either.
Right.
Although a lot of them
do.
Like Paul McCartney, he plays 27 instruments. He could have been the drummer. He could have been the guitar player. They needed a bass player, so he almost by fault, default. became the bass player for the Beatles.
Yeah.
But he could have easily been a guitar player or a drummer.
He could have been anything in the Beatles. But again, he's kind of the exception. He's
I don't know.
all things all the time.
I would imagine that most bass players can play guitar.
Well, yeah, I think most of them are.
Nobody grows up and goes, I want to be a bass player.
I think they're frustrated guitar players. Like me, I can play guitar pretty well, but I can play a bass even better. Not better, but you can get away with playing bass without knowing much technical stuff. You can carry it. You can carry. Yeah, if you want to get into
Billy Sheehan.
Yeah, if you want to get into that and or the jazz bass lines that Sting plays. But if you just want to play in a rock band and you want an easy instrument, bass is your thing.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why they're overlooked the most, because traditionally they're not as musically gifted.
Right. Yeah, I agree. One bass player that really only metal in the metal circles. This guy's a god. He's considered the best bass player in the history of metal, and he wrote all the songs for Iron Maiden, and that's Steve Harris.
Really?
Steve Harris is considered. If you ask anybody who knows metal, Steve Harris is the god.
He's the bass player in Iron Maiden?
Yeah, he's the one. If you listen to Iron Maiden's songs, the bass is what drives the songs, not the guitar.
True to that. True to that.
And that's all Steve Harris, and he writes all the songs too.
I did not know that.
And you ask any.
So he's like Nicky Sixx was to Motley Crue.
Yes, but he can also really play.
Yeah.
You ask any, Cliff Burton will come up. And you know who else always comes up too? This is just metal here, is Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses is a very respected bass player in rock circles.
Really?
I swear to God.
I thought he was just a frustrated guitar player and he just didn't they had the Slash, so he was kind of
you're not gonna take Slash's spot, Basically, for those who don't know, and I guess if you're music fans, you probably know this, but the bass is
But you gotta have a bass player. You can't have a band without a bass player.
Except for the Doors.
Well, but even still,
they had bass on the keyboard.
Right. And who's going to do that? And that's a whole other thing.
Right.
Would you consider Ray Manzarek a great bass player? He played bass and keyboard at the same time.
Right.
That's got to take some skill in your head. So hey, to Ray Manzarek.
Ray Manzarek.
Huh?
Bill Blasky.
So you got a bass player, and sometimes they're overlooked, but
there have been some great ones in rock history.
And Michael Anthony being number one.
There's a lot of bass players that probably like it in the shadows. It seems to be, if you look at the dynamics of a band, your front man's usually, the wild guy, and the drummer's usually kind of a wild man. The guitarist is usually the guy that's really into music, really into producing.
Yeah.
And then the bass player is usually, it's kind of like the Ringo of the band. You can't have four superstars.
Right.
So usually the personality of the bass players
has to be a little more.
They're the background.
Smaller. They gotta have a smaller ego.
You can't have four Jimmy Pages. You gotta have a John Paul Jones there. And so they're overlooked, but they are very important, and there have been some great ones in rock and roll history.
There's our one for the bass players.
One for the bass players.
All right, we'll catch you next time. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast, iTunes or Zoom. We got the one quick click subscription at the website, frustratedrockstars.com. Real easy, and it's free.
Everything's free. Everything's in your price range.
Just join us for drinks and rock and roll talk anytime.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. Serve folly. He even said that.
Wow.